work in HR, perhaps as an HR manager or a human resource professional, are you concerned that your advice is not listened to as much as it deserves? Are you concerned that you're not part of the top table decision making? Would you like to be at the centre of top management attention? I think these are really important issues because in my experience, HR doesn't get enough top management attention and therefore its impact is reduced. And this shouldn't be, because I think HR systems add most of the value to an organisation. So the question is, the big issue is, how can HR grab more of top management attention? And this is what I'm trying to address in this short video. So let's just think about it. I believe HR has control over the main assets in the organisation. If you go back to 1978, which incidentally is when most top managers were probably going through business school and trained, then fixed assets actually did make up most of the value of an organisation, up to 98%. Was in land and buildings and plant and equipment and stuff like that. Stuff that ends up in the balance sheet. So of course they were trained to take notice of balance sheets and things that they could see and touch. But today, fixed assets only account for maybe only 5 to 10% of the value of an organisation. And most of the value in an organisation these days is around intangible assets. Things like knowledge, how much knowledge is in the organisation, the relationships we have with people, the emotional assets, the culture and the way people relate to each other and can cooperate and work together, and time assets, how quickly we can get people and things happening, how processes can go through the organisation more quickly. So HR, these are the things that HR has control over. And this is why I, as a trained accountant, am concerned that accounting has probably got far more attention than it deserves, and HR has got much less attention than it deserves. I think part of the issue is that HR needs a different perspective. When you look at this little quadrant here, you can see that the top management are strategically focused on the inside things, and the board are strategically focused more on external environment. But HR seems to have put itself into the bottom left-hand box of being operational and internally focused. And so in order for them to be taken more notice of, they need to think more strategically, and they probably also need to think outside the organisation more, into the external focus. These are things that any HR professional can do, but they mustn't get themselves trapped into the operational internal. People are the main assets. Then HR should be the main advisor in the organisation. And yet we find that 68% of people are disengaged, 15% actively disengaged, and engagement is down to 17%. I mean, what an opportunity, but what an indictment too. What an indictment on the professionalism of HR. I mean, you're the guys who should be making this happen. It should be way, way higher, like 85% engaged instead of 17%. So what's the issue? I think HR tends to treat people the same. In their processes, they assume that what suits them also suits everybody in the organisation. But actually, Herman's Whole Brain Dominance Index, HBDI, shows that people are quite fundamentally different. They're so different that they're as though they're painted in different colours. And roughly 25% of people are blue, 25% are green, 25% are red, and 25% are yellow. And yet, if we treat everybody and put everyone through the same HR processes and expect the same sort of results no matter what we're trying to do, then you're sure to turn off You know, if your systems are green, say, and 3/4 of the people in the organisation are blue, yellow and red, well, you're going to turn off 3/4 of the people. They're going to become disengaged. We really need to think very fundamentally about the sort of organisation we have, who we've got in the organisation, and then design our processes to make sure that we are getting the most out of it, releasing the energy, releasing the genius that's in everybody. And that genius will be very different according to whether or not they're blue, green, red or yellow. I'm just going to spend a minute. So the diagram on the right shows an organisation. You can see that it's largely right-brained, yellow and red, and there's a few left-brained people, blue and green. To understand more about Herman, follow the link that I'll give you at the end of this program. When you're communicating with people, HR, in my experience, write one sort of statement, and if they're blue people, we call them thinkers, then their style will be brief and clear and direct. But organisational people want quite a different style. They want step-by-step clarity and things to be in chronological order. Whereas the red people, the relators, they want a friendly, they want an informal, they want it to be much more involving. They want to be involved in the process. And the yellow people, the innovators, they want expansive, exciting, they want fun sort of stuff. So do one way and you're going to miss out on 3/4. The content, you know, if you're doing it with, if you're a blue person, you're probably going to want it to be objective and accurate and to the point. But that doesn't work for the relators who want to be subjective and more personal and more caring. So they can be quite different according to, and the questions you need to answer are very different. And so the way you communicate with people in the organisation needs to take into account all 4 of these different types. So you need to ask the question, what we're doing and how we're going to do it and why we're doing it. In my view, if people are different, then they need to be organised differently. So let's say we did a Herman profile on an individual, and it looked a bit like the little coloured diagram on the left-hand side there, pointy shape out towards the yellow. And then we say, okay, now let's look at it in terms of jobs. So the right-hand top diagram shows a small box for a job, and this person's trying to fit into that box. And you can see a lot of his genius, a lot of his skills, a lot of his talent is poking right outside the box. It's actually wasted effort, it's wasted resource. And equally bad, because he isn't very strong, he or she isn't very strong in the blue and the green, then there's weakness in the job. The job has bits in it that aren't being done very well. Now, my solution would be to think of not jobs, but of projects, so bigger pieces of work. So look at the diagram on the right-hand bottom, and you'll see this box is bigger, and it's probably 4 times as big as the job. So we can fit 4 people into it, 4 whole brain people who are blue and green and red and yellow. So all their genius is being used, and hardly any weakness is left in the project. And so this is a very different way of thinking about how we can release energy and satisfy everyone so we can get everybody much more engaged in their work. You see in that bottom right, the blue people are going to be able to do the research. The yellow people are going to be able to come up with the ideas. The green people are going to be really good at making it all happen and tying it together and getting processes and so on working. And then the red people are going to make sure everybody's coming together and the team's working satisfactorily and so on. This is satisfying for everyone. A job, almost by definition, is not satisfying for everyone, but a project designed properly with the whole brain team involved can be highly, highly exciting. And you start, instead of having disengaged people, you start having highly engaged people. I think HR people tend to think in a very mechanical way, in my experience. It shows up in the organisation, the way they draw people on the organisation. They put them in trees. I believe that apes are in trees and people work in networks. You know, we put someone like Josh there, probably the most powerful, most influential person in the network, but he might be right at the bottom of the organisation in terms of trees. It just doesn't give any indication of where the relationships really are, nor where the influence comes from. HR can be much more powerful if they give managers and boards a much better idea of where the real relationships exist and where the influence in the organisation are. I strongly recommend HR people start thinking about their organisations in terms of networks rather than trees. I have a question. How well do HR really understand the business? You know, it's really simple, but I don't think many HR people understand it very well. Every business has three parts. There's an innovation coming up with the ideas, the operation making it happen, and then there's customer service about how we get this out to the customer. And all organisations need to be good at all three of those businesses. They need to be at least as good as their competitor. But no organisation can be world class in all three. It's like going to the Olympics. You have to choose the sport you want to be. You can't actually probably be successful at high jumping and swimming because the body shape and the exercise regimes, the stuff you eat, just about everything about is different according to the choice you make about your sport. And it's not strategic to not choose. You must choose. So the three choices really are that you can decide to be a product leader, like Apple Computer or Peter Jackson's studio, Wingnut Studios. These are organisations that put a lot of attention into the innovation side. It's about creative, so they need to be highly innovative and creative, and people are coming up with ideas, and we have almost no rules, and people are encouraged to break rules and to take time off to think for themselves and so on. Then you have the almost opposite, which is operational excellence. And these are people like McDonald's in the warehouse, people who follow the rules and have procedures, and everybody works like a well-oiled army, and everyone knows their place and they get on with it, and it's process. And then you have customer service or customer intimate organisations. And I think Harley-Davidson really know their hog customers. And IBM back in the 1960s really knew computers. And Booz Allen, when I worked in the Bank of New Zealand, they knew banking probably better than we knew banking. And so they know the customer probably better than the customer knows themselves. The three types of organisation. And we need to understand what our organisation is, what the word we use is value proposition, what our value proposition is. Because if you look at a customer intimate organisation, it has a chart a bit like this, a kite-shaped thing, which is pointing down towards down towards the red C quadrant. It has a lot of team structure, and people are really, really important, and it's so the sort of culture that HR needs to build depends on the value proposition that the company has taken in. And you can see from this, if it was a product leader, then it would need to be much more entrepreneurial, much more yellow, and we'd be wanting to break down rules and all. So there are really three major relationships in any organisation. There's brand, there's culture, and there's customer service. And you can see how these are related in this little chart here. That the way the customer sees the staff, and the staff see the customer is actually customer delivery. The way the staff see the organisation and the organisation see the staff, that's what we call culture. And the way the customer sees the organisation and the organisation sees the customer, that's the brand. And these four things need to be really closely linked together. You can't have the brand that sort of points out this way with its kite and there's customer service that goes that way. Lots of organisations do this, and lots of HR people randomly put in processes that are probably better suited for operational excellence than they are for innovation, even though the organisation trying to like hell to be innovative. So this chart here is very detailed, and I don't expect you to follow it, but you can see that in a customer intimate organisation, that the culture chart, the kite, shape of the kite, is the same as the shape of the kite in customer service, is the same as the kite in brand, is the same as the kite in the leadership. And in operational excellence, the shape of the kite is similar also in all four things, and different again when it comes to product leaders. So HR people who are putting in processes and so on and trying to develop cultures need to understand this stuff, otherwise they're going to actually probably do more harm than they're going to do good. You know, for instance, if you are trying to put in a process that's for thought leaders, you'd probably want a lot of movement, and you'd want a lot of questions and action methods, and lots of colour and music and positive psychology and telling of stories, and you probably want to include art and yes, so very different from what you'd have in a say a green type organisation, which is about following processes. The other thing that I think is really important is language. And I cringe sometimes when I hear HR people talking language, because although the language of top management and boards is frankly, I think as a trained accountant, I know that it's largely bullshit. You need to learn that language and use it. You need to put on your accountant's hat even if you're not trained. And it's really easy. You need to know at least the essence of a profit and loss statement and how to read a balance sheet. And you need to talk in terms of return on investment. You know, it is really a bit of bullshit, because I love the story about the Economist asked 16 people to generate 10-year forecasts. There were 4 finance ministers. There were 4 chairmen of multi-international companies. There were 4 Oxford University economics students, and there were 4 London dustmen. And you can bet after 10 years which one got the best, closest forecast. It was the 4 dustmen. So, I mean, I know you can put figures to anything and they don't matter a lot, but it is important that you learn it so that people give you that credibility. And you need that credibility before they'll listen to you and invite you into the top table. They don't want to cringe any more than I cry cringing when I hear about it. You know, the language is, what I guess another way of saying this is that really it's the unconscious in an organisation that matters. It's the heart stuff, the emotions, the feeling, the trust and the security that really matters. It's the things that you guys are great at and you guys have control over. But the logic and the costs, the head stuff, the conscious stuff, it probably only accounts for a small amount, but it's the bit that sits above like that iceberg. You know, your stuff is sort of somehow down below the surface, and you've got to bring it to the top if you're going to be listened to. So my name's Bruce Holland. I am the workplace wizard. I'm an expert in leadership development and organisational strategy. But I've found that really it's HR things that matter. And so I always talk about liberating the human spirit at work. And that is a very HR concept. I believe everyone has a genius factor, and it's part of our job to try and make sure that happens. If you can make sure that happens and play the game of learning the language, thinking about trying to step into that more strategic sort of quadrant, and think about the processes you're putting in place, then you'll be much, much more successful and you'll be much more listened to by top management.